So let's continue our discussion now. Angelo Agrizzi's lawyer, Daniel Witz, joins me now. Very good evening to you, Daniel. Thanks indeed for your time. So perhaps I think let's start here. If you could give us an update on Mr. Agrizzi's condition in hospital.
Evening. Thank you for having me on the show. I can confirm that Mr. Agrizzi is still in a very serious, or in fact, a critical condition. He is still on various forms of life support, and he is still under heavy treatment by the doctors at the private clinic.
Mr. Witz, I mean, I don't mean to pry. The medical report by the specialist physician says your client is suffering from chronic illnesses. I mean, is there any way you could take us into your confidence, of course, without giving us too much detail? What is wrong with Mr. Agrizzi? Is there any more detail that we can have at this stage? I'm sure you would imagine from certain quarters, others questioning, him having to be taken to a private facility. Is there anything more that you're able to tell us?
All I can mention, obviously I'm a lawyer, I'm not a doctor, but as South Africa saw, he suffers from severe respiratory issues and diabetes, which has caused complications since his health degraded.
All right, so you also maintain, of course, that the court erred in denying your client bail, that Mr. Agrizzi is not a flight risk. What do you then make of the state's assertion that, he has lots of assets overseas, but he's not disclosing them, and that he's lying about his assets abroad?
The state are making this broad assertion that Mr. Agrizzi is lying. But what they failed to tell the court is that he did in fact disclose his offshore assets, both to the South African Reserve Bank, where he got approval to move the assets offshore, as well as to the South African Revenue Services, where he paid his tax on the assets that are offshore, like any other South African with means would be advised to move their assets offshore in, unfortunately, a dire economy at the moment.
And in this particular issue, I mean, with what has now been brought forward regarding Mr. Agrizzi's condition, of course, it was just a day after he had been sent to jail that he had fallen ill at the so-called Sun City prison. Obviously, you're hoping that the court will take into account this particular aspect, which you think is very important.
Yes, definitely. It's not the only aspect that we've asked the court to take into account. It is obviously a major aspect regarding his health, but certain other aspects were raised before the Honourable Court, such as the fact that the court at Palm Ridge compared Mr. Agrizzi to the Guptas, who are still, there's allegations against them, but each case must be considered on its own facts. You can't compare Mr. Agrizzi to anyone else. His case must be considered its own facts. Over and above that, a bail application, it's important to understand that, is not a trial. It's not a form of punishment to push or squeeze disclosure out of a person. It's seen as, does the individual have ties in South Africa, emotional, financial? Yes, he does, and Mr. Agrizzi met those criteria. And over and above that, for 2 years or over 2 years, Mr. Agrizzi has taken state capture into his confidence, South Africa into his confidence, the NPA, SARS, the Reserve Bank. He's been at every single appearance, and every bit of evidence that he's given or testimony that he's given has been checked and verified and proven to be correct. So now for the state to come and say, well, he was obviously preparing this grand escape plan is ludicrous, for lack of a better term.
Thank you very much indeed, the lawyer, of course, for Angelo Agrizzi, Daniel Witz. Thank you very much indeed for your time. We're expecting, of course, that judgment in that bail appeal on Friday. SABC reporter Samkele Maseko is expected to be there on that particular day. So I think still to come, of course, economist Duma Qubule on what to expect from Finance Minister Tito Mbowene's medium-term budget policy statement on Wednesday.